happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 379 on August 12th, 2026. My name is Jason Neiffer. I am the Executive Director of Montana Digital Academy, which is the state virtual school located on the beautiful University of Montana campus, located in fabulous and unfortunately very smoky Western Montana. But hey, we're not here to talk about the smoke or the chewy air outside. I'm here to talk with my good friend and thought partner and colleague, Dr. Wes Fryer. Good evening, Dr. Fryer. How are you tonight, kind sir?
Good evening, Jason. I am good, and I am back at school. And it's actually, this is my third Zoom call of the evening because I had a couple other things. But it's honestly lovely to be able to just take them all from home from Zoom or whatever, from video. So doing good, getting ready to teach media literacy, STEM, and communication for maybe the 31st year or something like that. This is our fifth year, starting our fifth year in Charlotte, which seems crazy. It's gone by fast. So
happy new school year to you. In fact, I always loved the first day of school. To be honest, it was my favorite day teaching to get it started, right? But we're not here to talk about first day of school. We're talking about the other 364 days of educational technology news. And Dr. Fryer, what is this podcast all about? And I think this is the first time in a long time we've actually had 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, it's about greeting Peggy George down in Arizona live. So we're going to talk about the technology news. I will give you full disclosure that I, again, did ask Claude to help find articles, but I also curated my own from my Flipboard. But we have been, as always, reading a bunch of tech articles. We're going to talk about them, and we're probably going to rant. That's probably what we're going to do.
No, not us, Dr. Fryer. I can't imagine that's going to be part of our strategy this evening.
Now, your background is suddenly in focus, but you are out of focus. So what is up? Are you doing the continuity camera with the iPhone, or is this set up?
I am not. It's my traditional setup, and I'm not entirely sure what's happening, but apparently I have my blur on. So I guess we're just going to have to deal with blurry Jason tonight, which is...
That's okay. That's all right. Yes, so we have curated links. We have them at edtechsr.com/links. We will drop the Google Doc into the chat as usual. And we have, of course, a lot of AI, which Claude didn't just give us an AI category. It said for teachers and education, privacy and cybersecurity, big tech, social media literacy, and actually, I think maybe I did media literacy, and then our Geeks of the Week. And then there's the bleed over again. It's so weird. Oh, we're up to 10 live viewers. I'm also going to put in under cybersecurity the most mind-blowing podcast I think I've seen related to that. So we will definitely talk a little bit of cybersecurity. So I've been choosing the places to start. Jason, would you like to select the choice, or you want me to go ahead?
Oh, Dr. Fryer, it'd be my pleasure. And I think let's talk big tech and social media, because there's a lot of interesting things going on there, including Meta trial has heated up.
Absolutely. So I don't like, of course I don't like paywalls, but we've got a Washington Post article about this New Mexico court order. But then there's also articles from TechCrunch and PBS NewsHour. So I'll put the TechCrunch article in. And Meta is paying $567 million in a child safety case. And this case holds them liable for social media harms and addiction. This increases the total fine the company's paying in this case to almost $1 billion, to $942 million. And interestingly, it has, I don't know, did we talk about this one last time? They've ordered them to make changes to the way that it operates, to remove like counts for children under 18, to require approval from parent of a guardian, to change push notifications, to pause them between 10 and 7. These are real specific requirements, limiting minors to their usage of 90 hours a month, which is roughly 3 hours a day. And the order says, quote, significant numbers of people in New Mexico experience harm from Meta's products due to risks of sexual exploitation, interference with education, and adverse mental health outcomes. And we're going to maybe talk about Europe today as well with AI regulation, because some AI enforcement started in Europe in August this month. And this begs a question: if Meta is going to have to do this in New Mexico, Like, how does that affect the rest of the country? And we've talked about this in other contexts with California having some laws. And this is one of the reasons why the tech platforms in general they'd rather have a federal regulation they'd rather not have regulation, but if they have regulation, they'd rather have a federal regulation. But even if they do, there's still European regulation, yada, yada. I know you closely follow proceedings in the Montana legislature, and probably wisely in Montana. I think you only allow your legislators to get together every 2 years. Uh, Anything like this brewing, and what are your thoughts about this New Mexico hearing or New Mexico?
Yeah, I want to comment on the state versus federal for just a second and then jump into the New Mexico piece. Like, I bought that argument 10 years ago, right? That we'd rather have one federal regulation than 50 state regulations because technology transcends borders, that the internet transcends borders, social networking transcends borders. But the federal government can't get it done. So I do think that if these platforms were serious, and I'll specifically call out Meta here, they have massive lobbying arms, right? Certainly, they could have had something passed Congress by now, and you can't blame the current Congress for it because these problems have been obvious and internally known about for going on well more than a decade. And so to complain now about state regulation, I think is in poor form for big tech. But at some point, you have to be held responsible. And it's not like there wasn't warning signs from Meta's own research. I think the most stunning thing about this trial, and I only followed it maybe one or two articles a week on it, but the most stunning thing was that there was really clear, very damning evidence that Meta knew exactly what was going on across all of its platforms, and they chose not to do anything about it. And going back to our conversation about our term, the tech correction post 2026 election, they knew about things then too and could have done something. And what's been really interesting is that a lot of these major platforms have gotten rid of their trust and safety teams. So the good work that some of these platforms were doing the post 2016 election have been taken apart. You could be cynical and say it was due to the Trump administration, but I think that in some cases that might even just been an excuse to do what was expensive and difficult to do. No sympathy for Meta here. And more importantly, I do think that, and I noticed that one of the takes was that this was a tobacco moment. Good. I think we need to have some conversations about this. And I agree these are very specific outcomes, but I also do very strongly believe that specific outcomes might be the order of the day here, because what else are we going to do about these situations when we can't trust them to say, trust us, right? That's just not the way this is working right now. And we want to be as careful as possible with these incredibly powerful tools with our kids.
And this connects, as we'll talk about, with AI in terms of regulation, because the idea that tech companies should be allowed to just self regulate and they're going to take all the necessary steps to protect children and protect society is just not. It hasn't proven to be true. And I know that Tristan Harris and the Center for Humane Technology that produced The Social Dilemma, and they've now produced a documentary about AI, have basically said that was our first contact with artificial intelligence. It went really poorly. We need to learn from the mistakes of that. And I would think that this will set a precedent, because holding the companies who are creating frontier AI models responsible for some of the catastrophic, and I just say catastrophic because already we've had student teen suicides attributed to interaction with a chatbot. We've had other kinds of mass shootings, some different things that have strong evidence that AI played a big role in that. The question is, are these companies going to get off scot-free when it comes to liability, or are they going to be held accountable? And are they therefore going to be forced to put guardrails in? And there's an article I want to talk about with Meta, with open weights and open versus closed. This article from TechCrunch closes by saying there's a bunch of other lawsuits in the country on this, and one of them is a joint lawsuit filed by 33 states, and it was consolidated in Oakland, California. That one's pending. Other states like Tennessee have brought their own cases. So it really is a flood of litigation, and it's happening at the same time we have, I think, an unprecedented pushback by parents and by a lot of folks against screen time and against technology generally. So it really is an interesting moment in technology. I think it's also a time to advocate for good pedagogy, good teaching,
Yeah.
and the good use of instructional tools and digital curriculum, because digital curriculum, and I know you're in a pretty important spot to be able to talk about that and distance learning. There's incredibly positive ways and constructive ways that these tools have been used and can be used, but we're in the midst of a real pushback and tech correction. It's not only against tech companies, it's against the devices themselves. So I think that we'll watch and see what happens with this on appeal. But if this is indeed a big tobacco moment for tech companies with social media, that's a really big deal.
Yeah, it is. And we'll talk about AI a little bit later, but some of the articles are talking about the anticipated value of the marketplace for AI and education tools. And within 10 years, it's likely to be $20 billion, right? And that's huge, but we can't throw that money into a rabbit hole, right? And that's what I fear right now. And I will say that we work with some really good, smart vendors in this space through my day job. But we also have talked to a lot of people looking for money grabs. That's been very obvious in some of the work that we're doing. And although I think that efficacy and data showing the tools work is a somewhat difficult standard to meet, especially when you're experimenting with fast evolving tools. But we need to demand that in the long term from any educational strategy. And so I really want to continue to be really thoughtful about how we approach this. And I'm probably going to stick around, I think, in education a little longer than my retirement plans had suggested, in part because I want to do my part to do this round right. I just feel like we made so many mistakes 30 years ago with the internet that we can do something different here.
Yeah, absolutely. Peggy is asking for links to tonight's session, so I'm going to go ahead and put those into the chat. You should be able to go to edtechsr.com/links, and those should have the links for tonight as well. Actually, I didn't refresh the table of contents, so let me do that at the top of the Google Doc. That may be something. So now at that Google Doc, you can click on episode 379 and go down to tonight's links. Where shall we go next, sir?
Let's see here. Why don't we also cover? Oh, it's the same article. Actually, this one's interesting to me. Talk a little bit about the FCC broadcasting TV limit, because that's been an issue for almost 30 years now.
Yeah, so one of the challenges that we've continued to see, not only in telecommunications, but in other parts of our economy, has been the consolidation of big companies being able to buy up the small companies. And so NBC News reported on August 8th that the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, has scrapped the limit on broadcast TV ownership, and this sets the stage for more corporate consolidation in the media industry. We talked a little bit last time about local news, and I'm going to again repeat the statistic that I didn't have the stat for, but it was like 3/4 of local reporters in many markets are gone. We've got all these different sometimes newspapers that are still publishing or radio stations, but they may only have one person, or they may have a shared person who's not even from that community. And we have just seen the absolute crushing of local news and local media. And so everybody may not realize this, but we've had restrictions on the size of really the media footprint, traditional media footprint that a company can have. And so the cap was removed in a 2-to-1 vote. So it's been a 22-year-old rule. The rule has held for 22 years that a single company, quote, cannot own stations that reach more than a combined 39% of the US television audience. And that ownership limit is going to be replaced by, quote, a case by case approach. This has been expected. The FCC Chairman Brendan Carr has been advocating via op-eds. He wrote in Breitbart last month. He called the ownership limit an outdated policy that blocked local broadcasters from gaining the same scale as their competitors are free to enjoy. But this isn't a decision that appears to me to benefit small local organizations. It's going to really benefit the big fish, as we see. And this was in place since 2004. Congress boosted that in the 1990s. The limit had been set at 35% and boosted to 39%, which wasn't that interesting to say, ooh, it's got to be 39%. But anyway, because it's codified in federal law, it has stood. And so there was one commissioner who voted against it, Anna Gomez, and she called it unlawful on its face. And her quote is, "Eliminating the cap does not free local broadcasters from economic pressure. It just changes who is doing the squeezing. The large station groups positioned to grow even larger under this decision are not local broadcasters. They are national companies that own local stations and increasingly dictate what airs on them." In general, like I said, across a lot of industries, we've seen consolidation and the approval of just large mergers. And I don't know, you're a US history guy, Jason. I remember hearing at some point that if Standard Oil trusts had not been called a trust, we wouldn't have antitrust laws we do. We'd have anti-corporate law. But really the whole thing about antitrust law was saying you shouldn't allow companies to get so big. And we have a long history in the United States of really being concerned about a consolidation of power, having checks and balances, all of these kinds of things. And so I think that we need as educators to not only help our students become media literate consumers, but also literate creators of content. And I think that the puzzle of how we reclaim local news and we find ways to re-energize local news, whether that's through subscriptions, creative funding. England and the BBC is a very different model than we have PBS, but it's different in England. And I think there's a strong case to be made that a vibrant and thriving journalism ecosystem is really important for democracy. And I think that helping students understand that and become the leaders of tomorrow that can help create the conditions for a thriving democracy, which I think includes a free and open press, is really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this is when they talk about this rule being decades old, it is decades old. And we didn't really come to terms with the issues that it brought up 25 years ago when we were putting some of these more recent rules into place. And I think we've seen what a lot of the critics were warning. Mass consolidation. Montana, for example, used to have television stations across the state that had local news, that reported on local stories. There was the 3 or 4 competitive local news stations in larger towns in Montana. That infrastructure is all gone. And the kind of the last remaining local broadcasts, which did rely a lot on affiliates across the state as part of a network, but still where local broadcasts are gone. And now there's single statewide newscasts. And I think there's 2 networks in Montana that they have local reporters that are feeding into a master statewide broadcast. And not to mention a lot of the newspaper infrastructure has done the same thing. So very concerning. And remember, when companies are owned by, when stations are owned by single entities, it does impact the news coverage, and not just from the standpoint of the amount of resources that are dedicated to it. Stories are released or pressure is put on newsrooms. We have ample evidence of that. That's not a question at all. And we suffer for that. And I think that even though I still have a strong belief in the democratization of the internet and the ability for anyone to get a voice out there, the bottom line is our media has taken a huge hit in the last 30 years. And I wish we could go back and make some decisions differently. I still think that micropayments would have been a good idea 25 years ago. The ability to pay 50 cents to pay for access to today's news, I think would have been both well worth it and a great economic model where we could have continued to fund good journalism. But now I do appreciate that there's some people in entrepreneurial journalism. I'm thinking of Jeff Jarvis from the Twit Network that had that program in New York around that. But I think we need journalists to keep reporting the news.
And we can just go deep into this because this is a huge thing that's on my mind. I've been presenting about this and reclaiming our news feeds and the Fediverse and how we can use open standards. One of the dynamics that's happening is the web is closing. So in the 90s and the internet comes and Web 2, we have a very open web and we have blogging and we have RSS and we have podcasts. But in part because of AI and for other reasons too, a lot of the web is closing in terms of its openness. And I think we need to just grapple with this, and we need to look at the ways in which our communities, how are we serving our communities? Social media consolidation is really troubling as well. In the session that I did last week at the Civics of Technology online conference, I did a session, I think it was called your feed, your algorithm. But I was asking people, why did Elon buy Twitter? When we look at what's happened with social media, with Meta and Facebook, with Twitter, the web is very different than it was in the mid and early 90s when Jason and I were the old guys who were starting out with this stuff. And even with my websites, like with my WordPress sites, the amount of bot traffic and the drag that puts on my server, there's a lot of different aspects to all this. So I think politics matters and regulation. There are important places for regulation. And so, anyway, this media consolidation is going to continue to have an effect. But to your point, Jason, about the democratization of the web, this is what's great about this podcast. And in Substack, we do have journalists. And I know that Casey Newton's on Ghost, and we can debate whether or not everybody should leave Substack because they haven't deplatformed certain extremists. But there are journalists who are finding a way to be able to source their work. We have 404 Media, we've got a variety of different groups, but I think this is all really important. And I'm teaching broadcast media this year for the first time with middle school. I'm real excited about that. And I am interested in exploring ways that my students are going to be able to focus on local news and possibly be able to have a wider audience and impact a wider group of folks, perhaps through some of their media creation and their writing, because I think that's the possibility exists for our student journalists and our student writers to be able to do that. That's not going to solve our local news crisis, but I think there's a role there. And I'm excited to network and interact with more teachers who are doing that. Do you all teach a broadcast media class for the Digital Academy?
We don't. We teach an introduction to journalism, and I will admit that one of my, I know, and I was the newspaper teacher at Capital for the last 3 years of my teaching career. It was wonderful fun, and we really, in fact, I think we won the statewide award for best news website 2 of 3 of the years I was there. Thank you very much. But and we were really leaning into new media, right? We had a Flickr account and a YouTube channel and a great website where we were publishing those things. But the other thing that I wanted to mention there, though, is that I think that this idea of building curiosity in students journalism is a really great way to do that. And my dream was that we would put together like the Student Associated Press in Montana, where we would have students take a class with Montana Digital Academy and then do some kind of statewide thing that we could then, kind of trade back and forth with local student newspapers. There's also a lot of liability in that. And even though I still think that there's a possibility of that someday, it would be a fabulous, but more of a lightning rod than perhaps we want to take on. But so interesting. And I'm so jealous of you in that class this year.
I'll tell a quick story because we live in Southeast Charlotte, and we're a suburb of Charlotte, which is about 2.5 million people now. And we're a large growing community that has over 150 new people moving here every day, which is just mind blowing. But the area that we live in, we technically live in a community called Stallings, but we have a Matthews mailing address because of where the post office is. But Mint Hill is this community we just love. It's just 5 minutes away, but it's on the other side of the interstate. Anyway, there's all these different suburbs. And I've been wondering, where's our local news? We do not have a local news website or newspaper, anybody. So anyway, Shelly and I were at our favorite watering hole yesterday after having our last little outing before school starts. Struck up a conversation. It turns out this guy's a filmmaker. We're talking about this kind of stuff. And I was like, what would we call that? And they came up with Suburban Charlotte. So it's maybe like sub CLT. I haven't registered the domain yet. Since I'm saying it live now, I probably should go register it right away. But it's that idea, Jason, that maybe journalism and broadcast media teachers in our Charlotte area who are middle school or high school teachers could basically have students submit articles and videos and then be able to have, I don't know if you remember Global Voices Online. It's still available. It's a worldwide thing. It's a blog that folks all over the world will write about issues in their country. But I don't know. We'll see, because I still have such a passion for writing, for blogging, for journalism, and then for building community. And I really think in our polarized time, the local issues that probably we will disagree with them. We certainly have a lot of disagreement over data centers in our community as an example, but there's a lot of very good dialogue to have and good opportunities for students to learn about how our community works, to amplify local nonprofits, local entrepreneurs, all that stuff. So we'll see. I don't know how dynamic my overall context and environment is going to allow me to be with that, but it's on my heart. I've been talking about it, and we're going to see, and it's going to be exciting because kids care about stuff, right? And empowering students to have literacy skills, to be able to write, to create media, all of that's stuff I've been excited about for a long time. So it's going to be interesting to see where this goes and what our potential to impact our community is.
Absolutely.
Okay, before we get to AI, and I definitely want to because we have the most of the articles are, this is not going to be a surprise headline, I think, to either of us, but it's worth talking about. This is under the media literacy headline. It's from The Conversation on August 10th. The headline is, "Class, let's watch a short video. More than 75% of teachers say they use YouTube in the classroom." And this is absolutely the case for me. I think I am using YouTube every single day. I have it in pretty much all of my lessons. Of course, I create content for my students as well in terms of tutorials, and YouTube is usually where I put it because it's so easy for them to access and it's optimized and yada, yada, yada. So this was a research study, 393 preschool and K-12 teachers in the US, and the findings were published in Educational Researcher, a journal, in June of 2026. Teachers who say they use YouTube as an instructional tool for a considerable amount of classroom time alongside other teaching tools, when it talks about what a percentage it is and vetting them and stuff. It's really important, I would say, to just always watch your videos and to use clips, not to just play long videos. This talks a little bit about screen time, but it references article channels like Khan Academy and Crash Course. I think it's really important also to block ads. I'm still using uBlock Origin. You have to use uBlock Origin Lite in the latest version of Chrome. I use the Vivaldi browser as well on my own laptop. I don't know if I can use it on my school laptop, actually, because we're a Chrome environment where Safari is actually blocked. But yeah, YouTube is being used. So do you think that's true of Montana teachers? And are you all using YouTube as your video platform? Or do you all have your own homegrown video servers and whatever?
We have a third-party site we pay for, and the bottom line is that YouTube is still quite blocked in a lot of districts across the state for student users, right? And I don't necessarily disagree with that decision. I've become a lot, I don't know, I'm more centrist on blocking, on filtering. I'm not fully for it, but it just goes back to good instructional design, right? I think that's the part that I think this all comes back to, that YouTube can become a hole to lose time and brain cells to, just like regular old television can as well, right? I see that as a kind of a similar phenomenon, but I also want to be very clear that I think that there's an extraordinary archive of video available. And I think about my very first years of teaching when, by the way, my DVD collection was considered quite a stunning one at that time. And obviously, we've moved well past that to streaming now. Actually, the department I taught in had a very impressive Betamax collection. Yeah, and good stuff too, right? But what I would also say, though, is that shorter videos are a better way to show video in a classroom, right? The kind of stereotype of the teacher showing a movie for 2 weeks in class, it does happen, let's be honest about it, but that's not very good pedagogy, right? Short clip from a Ken Burns film, or I used to show part of the Zapruder film as part of my American history class, right? I think that's a good piece. And in fact, I see videos all the time on YouTube where, especially great historical content, it's like this would have been an amazing thing to show as part of a classroom, right? And a discussion or fodder for conversations, or as a primary source to draw things from. Even I think about, my YouTube algorithm sends me a lot of recorded 1981 television news and stuff. And I love that because I do think showing a story too from that could really add a dimension to that conversation.
Yeah, we've got a good chat going on talking about filtering. I really think that it's important for school IT departments to use filtering solutions that allow for differentiated filtering in a beginning, like different filtering for teachers and students. But even in terms of YouTube, not an on off for students. I don't know because I'm not the IT director anymore, but we have had a system at school that allowed individual teachers to directly approve YouTube videos for students, because there's clearly, just like there is online, generally stuff that is not appropriate for students and should be blocked at school. And so, anyway, that's a whole thing that IT professionals need to be aware of and school leaders need to be aware of, because if you're a principal or a superintendent, I think you need to be asking your IT department to filter the internet differently for teachers than for students. And then also to be able to have a little more granular control over the YouTube videos that you allow students to have, because I think access to YouTube is really important. I'm thankful that I
Yeah.
teach at a school where I'm able to use that. I do put some video on Google Drive, and we don't have our students putting their videos on YouTube, right? They're putting them onto Drive, and then they're embedding them on their Google Sites, or they're putting a link in Canvas or whatever. But anyway, important issues, and hopefully the AI tool development, the march of AI, is going to continue to enable us to do more positive things for our students and for teaching and learning. And perhaps this is an example, because it certainly is nice to. I remember being in Texas in a district at one time that was trying to block Google Images, just saying no, no Google Images ever. And it's better to have some granular control over that rather than just having to turn an entire tool off like that for everybody.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, should we talk about some AI? We're more than halfway done.
Sure. I don't know. Is there anything going on in AI?
Yeah, I'm gonna go to this article. Ooh, I gotta find my podcast about cybersecurity too. This is not probably. This is one of the best articles that I have read in months about AI, and it's from The Guardian, and it's from a children's fiction author, Catherine Rundell. I didn't know her. I've actually looked up her books and put one on my Amazon wish list. The title is "I Hate What AI is Doing to the Minds and Happiness of the Young." Catherine Rundell on the View from the Classroom. And there's a whole lot that she says in this article, but one of them is that reading is so important and writing is as well, and that this isn't a time to give up. And again, it's not just a binary AI good, AI bad, but we as educators have been encouraging students to read and to write, to learn to think. And so the whole concern over cognitive offboarding, is that what it's called? Where basically
Cognitive offloading.
cognitive offloading, thank you, where kids are just giving the assignment to the chatbot and then turning that in and not thinking. It is a real important concern. But this is a very nuanced article. It's a very strong argument for reading. In fact, it's helping. I haven't sent this out yet, but I'm considering asking my parents to really encourage their students to read for fun. I feel like we're
Yeah.
losing that. There's so much pressure. There's so much to do. There's so many sports things that we've got to do. Reading for fun is really important. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at that article and then think about the ways in which we're going to make decisions about when AI is appropriate, because there's also the argument in here, quoting AI company leaders, that, hey, let's teach the kids humanities in order to think critically and just to think. We have no evidence that just growing up with a chatbot is going to make you a very savvy critical thinker. No one has found that in any research at this point. And my anecdotal evidence would point in the classroom that it's the opposite, right? If you're just letting students use AI to just do all of their work, their levels of thinking are going to be much less than they would otherwise.
Yeah. And I can't stress this enough too. Wes and I are not saying that to turn technology off. We just need to be very judicious about it, right? Because unfocused, undisciplined application of these shockingly powerful tools do lead to negative outcomes, period. And in the same way that I won't mention the vendors involved. 8-9 years ago, when suddenly it was now drawing on screens was the thing, and the power of drawing. I think the best power of drawing is grabbing a piece of paper and drawing, as it turns out, right? There's just nothing that has to be on a screen there, right? But at the same time, we also are obligated to help students come to terms with the world they're going to be living in, right? So how do we, as smart, educated professionals, work with our colleagues to make sure that we balance that very real and very thoughtful?
And even if we have a policy at our school that bans all student AI use, or we choose to do that as an instructor, the reality is, and it depends on the age, I'm not saying this is happening with kindergartners or first graders, but certainly with my middle schoolers, they are using these AI tools. Many of them are using them no matter what the teacher is going to say or not say. And so I believe we have a responsibility, because this is just part of literacy, citizenship, and living in the world. We have a responsibility to be engaged in conversations about that use, and we need to be talking about it. And I think we should model it too. I think it's impossible for us to have well-informed opinions about this if we're not using these tools to some degree. I'm not saying you need to be using everything every day and doing all your work with them, but I know that I am so much more better informed about these tools and how dynamic they are, because it changes literally every day in terms of what their capabilities are, and thinking about what I want to allow students to use this, and what would the benefit of that be, or what am I going to choose to do as an adult and a professional educator?
Yeah, totally.
All right, let's talk a little European AI regulation. So this is from the European Commission. This was from August 2nd, and I have not honestly done a lot of reading about this. The headline is Safer and More Transparent AI, and it goes through the rules about AI systems that have now taken effect in the EU. And so companies are going to be held accountable to mark and label AI generated content. They need to have transparency when they are providing an AI system. They are going to be enforcing these rules through the European AI Office and the European Data Protection Supervisor. There are steep fines, which I won't read, but it's a lot. They're big. This act, the AI Act, entered force on 1 July 2024, but then it has a staggered schedule of taking effect. The goal is to have, quote, harmonized rules for trustworthy AI in the EU to promote AI innovation, uptake, and address potential risks to health, safety, fundamental rights, and also safeguard democracy and the rule of law, in part, so that they can address information and disinformation. So again, I think this poses a lot of challenges, because here we have these restrictions in Europe. We've got social media restrictions, a court's imposing in New Mexico. So I don't know how this is going to be playing out, and if these kinds of things will just be enforced in Europe. I'm glad that we're not just waiting for the US Congress to act, because I don't think we would see action. But it is interesting with the global internet to see these different kinds of mandates on AI companies and publishers. And so this is going to be an important thing to track moving forward, to see how this plays out, because I'm sure there's unintended consequences that'll be here as well, as there always are.
Yeah, and I would note I've been scaling back AI accounts for the last couple of months, and it helps that there's free this or that for teachers and yada. But one of the accounts that I will continue to do every month is my Mistral account from the Mistral AI lab in France. And I do get an education discount. So I think it costs me $7 or $8 a month. And it's noticeably not as good as OpenAI and Claude. I still use it a lot, though, in part because I like the philosophy behind it, and I know it's regulated by the EU. And I've seen a lot of interesting articles about their approach, because they know they're not as good as the frontier models. But that's not the point. They're stable, they're consistent, they are well regulated, meeting EU standards. But more importantly, large multinational corporations that are based in the EU want to be able to adopt an AI company that is stable and also able to follow regulations, right? Because they don't want to plug a system. It's not as important that it's one or a year behind the frontier models. It's more important that they don't have to then switch the model because suddenly it goes away or it gets bought out because of regulation this or scrap sale that. And I think there's a lot of interesting things to that. And I think we've talked about sovereign AI a couple of times on the podcast over the last couple of years. Canada is working on this too. South Korea is working on this. Japan is working on this. There's a lot of countries that really would like to have their own plays in this so that if it does become some kind of international trade war over AI, that they have places to still utilize that technology, especially if it becomes necessary for modern day business.
I dropped the link into the chat for AI nationalism on the English Wikipedia. AI nationalism is the idea that nations should develop and control their own artificial intelligence technologies to advance their own interests and ensure technological sovereignty. The concept is gaining traction globally, leading countries to implement new laws, form strategic alliances, and invest significantly in domestic AI capabilities. So, yeah. Okay, let's talk. It would be good to talk about Mythos and the hacks and all this stuff, because I talked to someone today who said that's just all, not blunder.
Oh,
Bluster.
marketing?
It's all bluster. It wasn't
Yeah.
real. These aren't really doing anything. These just fill in a blank, and that's all garbage, which I don't think that I agree with necessarily. But I want to go down to this article about Meta. This is from CNN Business 2 days ago on on August 10th. Meta launches open weight glimmer model, staking a claim in the open versus closed AI debate. I think this is fascinating. I think it is super important. And I'd love to hear what you think about it, Jason. We've talked about how China, oddly enough, has been the leader in AI openness, in open models. Meta had their LLaMA model, but I don't think they've been emphasizing it as much. But Mark Zuckerberg just released this big announcement and post where he is saying that the democratizing power of AI is going to be more broadly disseminated if we don't just have a few companies controlling it, but we have open weight models and it's not all closed. And so that's where Meta is going to throw a lot of their money and emphasis. And under this headline, Zuckerberg's vision for AI says Zuckerberg's thesis paints an idyllic picture of the benefits of AI, writing that the technology will give every individual their own custom assistant, tools to build businesses, and a tutor with a, quote, PhD in every subject, end quote. Society shouldn't just hand a few select companies the keys to create, control, and distribute these tools, he argued. But this does basically follow the move fast and break things philosophy of Facebook. And Bernie Sanders is one US politician who's calling for, let's slow down, let's pause, let's stop this race. I do not see the race stopping. I do not see us slowing down. I do not think the US Congress can effectually do that. And I don't think the administration is supportive of that. And I think big tech is very much in the pocket of the current administration. I don't think we're going to slow down. But what are your thoughts, Jason? Open weights, open models, closed systems, frontier models. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting where Facebook has been going with this, because one of the things that was true a year and a half ago was that Meta was very much at the lead of open models. Their LLaMA models 1, 2, and 3 were really interesting, and people built some cool things with them. Right? They took the open weight model, they traded their own training set, it added different sets of rules, it compacted them significantly so they would fit on edge devices. So in other words, devices without as much power to them. And then their LLaMA 4 model, which a lot of people thought was rushed to market and then ended up being not nearly as interesting as their LLaMA 3 models, fizzled out. And so this is a new direction for them for sure, because they have a commercial model and an open source model in the same classes here. But I think that Zuckerberg is right. Yeah, and to Dido in the chat, yeah, it was super bulky, and I think they were bragging. If I remember correctly, they had one of those 400, one of the early 405 billion parameter models with the LLaMA 4.2, and yeah, I think open source is really important, and also not companies should be able to internalize AI for privacy purposes. And I think the best way to do that is with an open source system. I think most of the frontier labs, with the exception of Anthropic, agree. And so I think we need to continue down that path.
So I want to get your take on the going rogue stuff, and I'll drop in an article. There's a lot of articles in here, but this one's from Digital Trends on August 4th. It says, once again, OpenAI and Anthropic AI models are going rogue and hacking services. And this whole series of articles isn't just Anthropic. This is multiple ones. This is Meta as well. And what they are saying in these articles is that researchers in third-party labs and organizations red teaming these models to try and test them took off some guardrails, but they did not instruct the models to do things like go on the live internet and try to hack this GitHub or try to impersonate this and create these fake accounts and do these things. So from my read, it really does sound like these systems are doing autonomous things that they weren't directed explicitly to do, and that it does seem like breakout events where the AIs are going rogue and doing things that we wouldn't be happy with them doing. But again, there's folks out there saying, no, this is, PR, this isn't real, nothing to worry about here, kids. So do you have an opinion about that, Jason?
At the lowest level, Wes, I've seen this in my own agent development that I've been working on the last couple of months. If you tell so I play a lot with agent platforms. I have some fabulously ridiculous things that I've been brewing up in my home lab, in part because I'm trying to find a way to deal. Like, I think that the most interesting application of AI for me is how do I deal with the stuff that I don't have time to deal with without feeling overloaded, right? Stuff that brings value to my professional and personal life, but I don't want to scroll through an RSS feed all the time, right? Like, I'd rather that an AI does that for me and then just gives me the bits that are going to be the highest value to me, right? But I've given Hermes agent like literally a task: figure out how to download these videos from this website. And in this particular case, it was for the Montana legislative website, and it lost its download button. And I'm sure there's some hacky, weird Chrome extension I could download to do that, but I don't have time to figure that out. So I could literally just say, go download these videos for me. And when you're done, run a transcription model on them and then clean up the transcript. And so I can read it later. And it'll just do that overnight for me. Like, even with, I think I mentioned to you, Wes, that I've got some Trash Can Max, the 2013 Trash Can Max sitting in my basement that I bought for like basically nothing on eBay, running the software. These are 13-year-old desktop computers that it takes 4 hours to transcribe a 2-hour meeting, but who cares, right? That it's getting the job done. And like, I didn't have any coding expertise, right? And so are you telling me it can figure that out, but it can't run any security tools? If it's trained on the right stuff and you can download Linux distributions that have all sorts of fun hacking tools and penetration tools in them, yeah, they can go break into other systems.
Okay. I want to share this. Have you watched the Sean Ryan show? This is a bit like...
No.
Okay. So he's a former SEAL and a very interesting guy who has a lot of folks on his podcast. And this is the most interesting cybersecurity one I've ever seen. It's with Kevin Mandia, who founded Mandiant Technology. And this is a long podcast. I watched the clips of it. This is a 3 hour and 15-minute podcast. But this is Kevin Mandia, cybersecurity expert, hunting the world's most dangerous hackers. He graduated from college in '92, and so he's basically my age, which is interesting, and ended up Air Force, counter cyber at the very beginning of cyber in the Pentagon. But his description of how quickly cyber has just been taken over by AI. He says that we are in a dangerous time where he feels like eventually defenses for everybody are going to get better because these tools are going to elevate the bug hunting or whatever and being able to identify vulnerabilities. But right now, so much is so vulnerable, and you can go down different YouTube rabbit holes for sure, and you can certainly look at all kinds of doomsday stuff. But I would highly recommend this podcast to people. And Mandiant was bought by Google, and he started a new company, I think, back in September. And just the power of AI coding and the power of using an AI assistant to help you. If people have not experienced this, I just don't think they probably have an adequate comprehension of it, because as I'm talking to people about this, and especially folks that are saying the AIs, they just fill in the blank. I mentioned this to my wife. I think it's a bit like Wikipedia, where many people, including some teachers and librarians and others, formed a perception about Wikipedia right away when it came out that it was trash, that anybody can edit any article, and therefore it's never going to be useful. It's trash. And that became a record that they played over and over again, and they never got over that. Well, Wikipedia has been around for 25 years now, and it's a very useful resource, especially as a launching pad for your investigations and your search. And I feel like with AI, a lot of people were told early on, it's just Mad Libs. It's just filling in the blank. That's all it is. And all this other stuff is just hyperbole, because it hallucinates all over the place, and it doesn't do anything that's valuable. It's trash. And I can tell you, as someone who is spending hours and hours vibe coding, it's freaking unbelievable what we're able to do with these AI assistants with code. And so anyway, that podcast goes into it. And anyway, I'm excited to be living right now in this time, because I'm able to do so much more than I could without these AI tools.
Yeah, and I think that I see this within my purview in regards to the stuff I can get to during my day and stuff I can. AI is starting to get to the tipping point where it really is focusing on the stuff that is bothersome to not do, but wouldn't get done in a timely way without some assistance there. And so for that, I really think that's the biggest impact that it could have, especially in the teaching and education world.
I'm going to do one more quick article, and then I think we probably better Geek of the Week it. I don't know if you've heard about this. Headline, this is from the Northeast Times on August 1st by Maya Brooks. Headline, Yale AI cheating case hinged on a word file mix-up. And so this is a dispute between a Yale University MBA student. The university alleged that he used AI on a final exam. It became a 13-count federal lawsuit. They repeatedly asked for his Word document over and over again. One of the things that just came out is he said, I didn't use Word, I used Pages. And they said, oh, give us your Pages document. And he gave it up. But this is the part I felt was so powerful that I'm quoting the article. At a November 8th hearing, Ringgold, who's the defendant, maintained his innocence and argued that AI detection tools are unreliable. He submitted GPT-0 scans, which is an AI cheating checkbot, GPT-0 scans of works by a Yale dean and a former university president that flagged selections, some published over 30 years ago, as having a 100% probability of being AI written, according to his lawsuit. So that is really genius to show how these tools are absolutely not effectual. And I think this is an important thing to say moving into this academic year here in North America, is that if your institution or your department is relying heavily on the use of AI detection tools, user beware. Certainly students can be silly and include things with the prompts, and it can be just obvious. And as we are getting to know the voices of students, there's a whole lot of spidey sense and other things that we have as teachers to tell when students may have not fully done their work themselves. But relying upon these tools to levy these accusations, and in some cases these have real major implications for graduating and failing courses and things like that. And I'm afraid we're going to continue to see those kind of articles. So
yeah, and I'll just mention, I posted on, there was if you can call it something on LinkedIn, a social media trend or a viral trend, but a lot of people were posting screenshots from various tracker tools with their pre-AI dissertations, and so I did the same thing. And one of the tools that was mentioned, and I can't remember what it was now, it did cost me a lot of money relative to what I got to put just one chapter of my dissertation in there, but it said it was 40% generated by, or 40% was generated by AI, including the first two paragraphs, which included a lot of M dashes in there, because I love M dashes, and I'm still mad that M dashes have a shadow cast upon them, because M dashes are excellent writing tools. But it did spark an interesting debate that I actually need to go in and answer some of the very thoughtful pieces. But I get a lot of, well, you're using the wrong tool. What's the right tool then? right? If this is not the right tool, and people are certainly spending a lot of time selling these tools to you, right? So which one is the right tool? If we can agree on that and it's consistent, that would actually do something very interesting, but that just doesn't seem to be where we're at here.
The tools that show how you have created your Google Doc, and there's free extensions for doing this. And if there's a huge block of text that suddenly is pasted in, those are good things to use to have conversation with students. Again, I'm going to try to encourage my students to fully attribute when they are allowed to use AI, their uses of AI. And that's going to hopefully allow us to have better nuanced conversations about what they did, what they learned, what the AI did, how they iterated, all those kind of things. Do you want to do either your Godmother of AI or the Gold Rush?
No, let's wait for those for next week, because I think those are going to be, they're good articles, but let's do it next week.
Okay. I dominated the article coverage here today, but hey, where did an hour and 2 minutes go, Jason? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Hey, Dr. Fryer, what's your geek of the week?
My geek of the week comes from the amazing Tony Vincent. And if you don't know Tony Vincent in educational technology, where have you been? Tony has apparently vibe coded an amazing community called TeacherHive.app. It says, bring the app your AI built. TeacherHive gives it a home. Browse hundreds of apps made by teachers or add your own. Paste the HTML from ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, or drop in a link. And TeacherHive makes it easy to use with a class, keep for yourself, or share with other teachers. As an example, he's got a roll your own Padlet that he's created, but there's all kinds of things. So you can sign up for free, but you can also pay to have some additional features. His section at the top called The Buzz is news. And I'm serious about this. Tony Vincent is absolutely one of the most innovative educational technologists and teachers ever. And so I'm super excited to see how he's into this. And I literally just joined this 2 days ago or something. But I'm excited because vibe coding is something I'm into, and Tony is as well. And he's created a community where we can come together, compare notes, learn together, and share, which to me sounds fantastic.
Yeah, me too. And I'm not surprised that this, in fact, it screams Tony Vincent when you even go to the website, right? And I'd like to share, this is just nerddom at this point, and it reminded me of your communitarian prepper projects, Wes, but this is an off-grid communication system that is called Meshtastic. And you can build these basically little like BlackBerry-like devices. You could also do it on your phone. I think it attaches via Bluetooth to it. But basically, you can, and there's hundreds of hardware platforms, and you can buy rando stuff on Temu and stuff. And it apparently works in a surprising number of places because a lot of people are starting to pick up these devices. And so if you're just a nerd, right? And first of all, bless you for being a nerd, because there's not enough of us in the world, but this is a very interesting project. And I'm going to see if I can get into this, an independent device for less than $20 to just see if there's a signal in my neighborhood or not. But you can run relays and stuff. And if the grid goes down, then this would theoretically continue to function. So meshtastic.org is that project, Wes, and I love the look on your face right now.
Thank you for sharing this, because doggone it, back to the podcast, Kevin Mandia. Have you ever heard of a red lever drill? Have you heard of this?
No.
It's when the company or the organization has to practice going off grid. Can your business still sell products? Can you still quote out services? This is something that we need to do. He doesn't actually think China is going to try to take down the whole grid, but we've got criminal elements and nation states and all these different folks. And so anyway, I can talk about that a lot, but I think that preparing for at least a short-term grid outage is very practical, because we have weather events and things like that happen. And you have given me something else to be distracted. Thank you so much.
We're maybe not good for each other, Dr. Fryer, because
I think it's very good.
Dr. Fryer, where can people find you on the interwebs?
I'm on wesfryer.com, and I share a few things in a few different places. How about you?
Yeah, probably the best place to find me right now is aicentrist.com, but I'm working on something new, as I always. But hey, this is the EdTech Situation Room. We are a once a week-ish podcast, a little more consistent as of late. We're on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, sometime in the middle of the night UTC. We'd love it if you could join our increasingly large audience live.
We're doubling from live.
I know. It's amazing. And if you can, I think I am, as a matter of fact, right? I'm good to go next week and maybe even the week after. That's how clear my schedule's been on Wednesday nights. But if you can't join us live, find our archives on YouTube, go to our website, EdTechSR.com, find us on Substack. We like to share. And also we want to hear from you, right? If you've got thoughts about this stuff, part of why we do this is to process these ideas with each other. But when we can do it with our audience and people we can connect with, that just makes the community much better. And if you disagree with us, even better, because that's what we're looking for here, right? That's how we kind of decide for ourselves. We hope you have a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay savvy, and we'll see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.
Good night, everyone.